So now we're getting to the exciting part where we're actually going to be able to interact with the command line and write a real program that runs. We're continuing with our cell phone contract example. You may remember that we were comparing the cost of 2 cell phone plans with ATV Telecommunications. We had our Super Saver plan for $39.99 a month, and we had our Big Talker plan for $59.99 a month, and we were talking 1,200 minutes. Now, let's review some of the shortcomings of our previous work. We can't see the results on the screen. That's really frustrating and disappointing because one of the things that's really fun about programming is getting to see what the program does right that very minute. But we just don't have a complete program yet. The other thing is that we haven't handled what happens when you start talking more or less very well. So at this point, everything's just a constant. So that's boring too. So now we're going to create a whole program. First, we're going to open Eclipse, then we're going to create a project, then we're going to create a class. Now, class names always start with capital letters and have curly braces to hold the class body, and we're going to create a main program. The main program is public static void main, parentheses, string square bracket args, parentheses. That's a lot to think about. And to make matters worse, for right now, it's just going to have to be a magical incantation because that's how programming works. The curly braces also hold the body of the main program. So let's go to Eclipse and get started. Here I'm exiting PowerPoint, and I'm going to the Launchpad to start Eclipse. This is the workspace that we set up when we were setting up your computer. I like to use one workspace for the whole semester if I possibly can, because then I can go back and look at programs. Now I've got some old code there that I don't want to look at, so I'm going to get rid of that. It's always best to start with a clean slate whenever you can. Now we're going to create a project. So we go to File, New, Java Project. You can name projects whatever you want, but I recommend that you name them something meaningful. And spelling it right helps too. So I'm calling this Iteration 3 because this is the 3rd time that we visited this project. Now we're going to finish. And you'll notice it appeared over here in our list. When I hit that little triangle, it creates a directory called Source. And Source is where we want to store our class files. The easiest way to create a class is right up here with this little green target. So we create a new Java class. Now class names are much more particular than project names. They can't have spaces in them and they should start with a capital letter. So here is cell phone. And notice it's giving me a choice to create a main program on its own. This is kind of a mixed blessing because it doesn't always create it just the way you would want it, but it's kind of nice not to have to memorize the words for now. Just remember you do have to remember them eventually. So now we have our public class cell phone. Unfortunately, Eclipse makes things a way that I don't like them. And so I'm going to make a few changes here. The first thing I'm doing is lining up the curly braces. That really helps you see what the structure of the program is, and it's something that I recommend you do too. Believe it or not, computer scientists are really insane about this curly brace thing and have very strong opinions about it. So don't be surprised if the next person that you take a programming class from has different preferences about curly braces than mine. But I find that mine work really well for beginning programmers. So right here we have the basis of our cell phone program. The next thing we want to do is to include our previous work. Now we have done a lot of work on this program. I've summarized it here on the PowerPoint slide, and so I'm going to grab it and copy it into our program. Here's the grab. You know, we'll have to clean this up a little bit, but it's better than having to type it all again. And here we go over to Eclipse to copy it in. Okay, now some strange things happened. Notice these little red X's over here? That tells you when Eclipse is unhappy. In this case, what it's unhappy about is that PowerPoint does something weird with double quotes. It makes them little 6s and little 9s, which looks nice in PowerPoint, but isn't so nice for programming, because in programming, double quotes have to be exactly the same. And so that should settle it down. Oh yes, the other thing, I see when I wrote this, I made a little mistake. plan name wasn't an int, it was a string. And that's why it didn't like being assigned the value of double quote super saver double quote, because that isn't a legal value for integers. So notice that Eclipse is actually helping us find the problems that we have in this code. That was a heading, so we certainly didn't need that. And you'll notice that our line of code here is going off the screen. Now, that's a problem too. The way that I like to fix that is right here. Bottom line, you cannot decode code you can't see. So having code go off the screen is always a bad thing. Now, if you think that I'm being very particular about how these things are done, absolutely you are correct, because keeping code neat and organized makes it much easier to use in the long run. Now, I don't know exactly what this is unhappy about right now, so let's go and look over at this little X and see what's going on. Invalid character. So this is probably another one of those little PowerPoint crazy things. So if you're getting the idea that these things are difficult to do, they can be. You can make a lot of little errors that are very hard to find. Now you'll notice right now that Eclipse is telling us a couple of little warnings over here. So let's take a look at what those warnings are. It says the value of the local variable plan name is not used. And in fact, it's correct. We haven't used the plan name yet. And here it says the value of the local variable total cost in pennies is not used. Now you might think it's wrong about that because we did assign something to total cost in pennies here, but we didn't do anything after we assigned it, and that's what it's complaining about. So what this tells you about Eclipse is that Eclipse is a little bit of an alarmist, and it's going to tell you about problems that aren't real problems, particularly in the warnings. So you don't want to spend too much time looking at those warnings because sometimes they're correct and sometimes they're not. In this case, we just haven't finished our program yet. The next thing we need to do is to add some comments to improve the code. Now, if you're thinking to yourself that comments can't possibly improve code, oh my goodness, are you wrong? Comments always improve the code, particularly when you have to go back to it later. And we are going back to this program later. So let's put some in. So we're declaring variables at the top, and so that's what I've put in as a comment. This is a great place to make a comment about why we decided to store the money in pennies. So we decided to store money in pennies because pennies are indivisible. If you ever have to maintain somebody's, whoops, and apparently I spelled that wrong, although I guess it must be close enough for government work. And the rest of this looks just fine. So here we'll make a comment. Calculate the total cost. Now you may not think our program's any better, but it really is quite a bit better because now we can actually see what the various parts of code are doing. The next part is really the exciting part. We're finally going to get a chance to write output. Now this output is so short, I'm not even going to cut and paste it. I'll just type it in when we get to Eclipse. System, out, print line. You'll notice that Eclipse is making lots and lots of suggestions. Some good suggestions, some really bad suggestions. So I tend to ignore those suggestions and just type the code I want to type. So I said the total cost is, and total cost, pennies. And there we go. We finally have a program that we can run. Notice also that one of our little yellow warnings went away because now we've used total cost. Now Eclipse actually has a point in what it's saying about Super Saver. We haven't used that yet. So let's add that in. The total cost for the, now we're going to break this and do plus plan name plus is, oops, get it where we can see it. And once again, we've gone off the screen. So let me put it back on the screen. Notice that I did it the same way both times. I put the operator on the left-hand side instead of out on the right. I like to do that so that I know exactly how it's related to the previous text. These little nuances do make a difference when you're programming. Okay, are you ready? Let's run the program. The total cost for the Super Saver was $7,499. Huh. Well, there's a problem. That's a pretty high cell phone bill. So what went wrong here is that we had stored our money in pennies, and we forgot to take care of that when we were doing the output of the program. These things happen all the time in programming, and it's not necessarily a big deal. So let's go back and fix it. To change pennies into dollars, which is what most people would be expecting, you divide by 100. Now let's run the program again. Well, that wasn't what we were expecting either. Notice what happened now is that our 99 cents disappeared. Now, if you'll think back to your knowledge about how primitive data type operations work, you'll realize that we're dividing total cost in pennies, which is an int, by 100, which is another int. And remember that that truncates. That wasn't what we wanted to do because dollars have a decimal point in them. There's a really easy way to fix this, and that is to change 100 to 100.0. When you do that, you're dividing an int by a double, the int gets promoted to a double, and we should see a double on the screen. Okay, one more time. And there we go, $74.99. And that looks like a good result. Thank goodness. Now you can get a lot of these disappointing results. It's one of the reasons you need to start programs really early, is so that you have time to figure out what's going wrong and even get other people to help if you need that to be done. So we've run our program, we fixed our disappointing results. The next thing we need to do is to get input from the user, because that's when programs really get exciting. It's when you can control what they're doing. Now this uses a scanner object, which is attached to a keyboard. So that looks like this. Scanner keyboard equals new scanner of system in. So there you're saying create a keyboard object so that I can get input from my keyboard. Each program should do this only once, and that turns out to be important. The other thing is we have to tell Java where to find the scanner. We do that before the class declaration, that is before the public class thing that we wrote earlier, and it looks like this. Import Java util scanner, and then we need to prompt the user to enter data. That's something that beginners forget to do often. It's hard to know what to enter into a program if you don't have any data. So that will be system out print line, enter the number of minutes you talk each month, and then we're going to get the input from the user. And that is talk minutes equals keyboard.nextInt. So there are the pieces. Let's go put them in our program. Going back to Eclipse. Now we need to think about where we're going to put them in. This talk minutes equals 1200. That's the variable that we want to get from the keyboard. Now notice that Eclipse got upset. It has a little red line there under talk minutes because talk minutes hasn't been initialized. That's okay because we're going to initialize it in just a minute. So let's start from the top. We needed our import statement. So we're going to import with one M, java.util.scanner. Then we're going to create a scanner object, which we're calling keyboard, equals new scanner, system.in. Now, all of these things are staying the same. Right down here, we'll make a comment, get input from the user, and we will say talk minutes equals keyboard.nextInt. Whoops, wrong thing, nextInt, with parentheses after it. Now, wait a minute, what did I forget to do? I forgot to put in the prompt. System out print line NTLN. Enter the number of minutes you talk each month. Never hurts to spend an extra minute looking at those things and making sure you have them spelled exactly correctly. Okay, so now our talk minutes has been initialized, and notice that Java is happy again. There is one little red thing over here. Oh, I see what went wrong. I made a mistake. Look at where I put our import statement. Now, I should have spotted this a little bit earlier because there was an indentation that was incorrect. You know, these are the things that happen when you program, and they're no big deal. In fact, learning how to work around these things is a big part of doing programming. So what I need to do here is to take this and cut it and move it to where it should have been in the first place, which is before the main program. Notice now Eclipse is happy with everything right now. So there we have it. We have our input in place. We've prompted for it. I think we're ready. So let's run the program. The first thing we want to do is enter 1200 because that's the number of minutes that we talked. The total cost is $74.99. Now when I look at it this time, I see that there's something missing. Usually we put dollar signs in front of dollars. So let's go and fix that in our program. Yes, I know I'm being picky, but this is what makes you a good software engineer, is when you pay attention to these little details and get them exactly right. So I put it there. Notice I didn't put a space before it, and let's run the program again. Always remember to run your program after you make even the most inconsequential change, because it's so easy to break things and have them not work. Every semester I will have students that will turn things into me who added one comment in a program and didn't check that the program was still running, and they can lose credit for that. So that's not a good thing. So let's run one more time, see if we got our dollar sign in the right place, enter the number of minutes, 1200, the cost. Oops, what happened? Put it in the wrong place. See, that's what happens all the time. Like I say, these are not big problems. It should have been right there. You'll make lots of mistakes like that too when you're programming. Don't worry about it. It's not a big deal. The big deal is whether you can fix it or not. Enter the number of minutes you talk, 1200. Total cost, $74.99. That looks really good. It could have a period after it, but there comes a point to move on with other problems. So up to this point, we've only worked with the Super Saver plan, but you might remember we actually had two plans. So the Big Talker was $59.99 a month for 1,000 minutes, and additional minutes cost 3 cents each. So let's go and add the Big Talker plan to the program. Okay, let's think strategically about this. Where do we want to copy and paste? We don't want to copy and paste all of this stuff, because if we're going to make a fair comparison, we should be using the same number of minutes in both plans. So we don't need that stuff copied. What we need to do is, after we have calculated the first name, we need to just recalculate the second one. Our monthly cost in pennies is going to be reassigned to $59.99. Our additional minutes in pennies is going to be assigned to 3. Our plan name is going to be reassigned to the Big Talker, and there should be one more of those. So let's go and look for it. It was the plan minutes. By the way, let's fix that. Notice that one of the parameters of the plan was in a little different position, and that got kind of awkward. So let's cut this and move it down here where it makes more sense. And of course, beautify the code. What's more, it might make more sense to declare talk variables where we actually use it. So there we go. Of course, we now have this awkward white space. We certainly don't want to have that hanging around because that doesn't look good. And let's scroll down and take a look around and see what's going on. So there's the cost for the Super Saver plan being printed out. Here are our parameters. Now it turns out our cost is exactly the same, and this is exactly the same. So we can just copy that code and paste it in. Okay, so do we have all of our parameters here? Well, notice we only have 2 of them. We don't have our monthly minutes. So let's go and take a look at how many minutes the Big Talker had. It had 1,000 minutes. So we'll put that in. Whoops, right there. And there's our Big Talker. One of the things that I'm doing when I'm looking at this code is making sure I changed every single thing that should be changed. So monthly cost in pennies got changed, additional minutes in pennies got changed, and plan minutes got changed. The talk minutes didn't get changed because we're trying to make a fair comparison. We're at the moment of truth. We're finally going to see which plan we should choose. A drum roll, please. Here we go. The number of minutes we talk was 1,200. The total cost for the Super Saver was $74.99, and the total cost for the Big Talker is $65.99. And when I look at that, guess what we see? Another mistake. We left out a space after the, and that's why things are smashed together. It's a mistake that happens all the time. But let's run again. Minutes, 1,200, and there we go. Whoops. And there's a problem with cutting and pasting. Notice that I changed one, but I forgot to change the other one. Well, this is really getting annoying, but programming is like that some days. So one more time. Whoops. Except, of course, it'd be nice if I entered the 1,200 in the right place on the screen. There we go with a satisfying answer. So we can see that the Big Talker is the plan we really wanted. So let's make some observations about this program. First off, notice that I didn't need to add in any additional variables when we added in the Big Talker. That keeps the program a little cleaner and neater, which, as you've probably figured out, is something that's kind of important to me. We could have created a second set of variables if we wanted to, but then our variable names would have to get longer because we'd have to put Super Saver or maybe SS after one set and BT or Big Talker after the other. So there was really no advantage of having 2 sets of variables. So I really like to keep the program a little bit leaner and meaner, although you could do it both ways. The other thing to notice here is the strategy that I'm using. Notice that I'm building the program a little bit at a time, and that I'm compiling and running really often. Those are good strategies to use. Sometimes when I was learning to program, I might write 3 or 4 pages of code and then try to go in and compile it and run it, and that just makes it a lot harder than it needs to be. So work a little bit at a time. You'll find it a lot easier. It also makes it easier to find the mistakes.